Noon, good morning, depending upon where you are. Our guest is based in the US, just traveled from Pakistan to US. So I don't know if it is appropriate to say good morning or good evening, maybe
Both
completely
work.
jet lagged, but thanks to Ali Hussein. I wanted to start out with a little anecdote. I was in DC this summer and I was driving and I had my smartphone with me. I was, supposed to reach a friend's house, put the navigation, Google Maps, and, it just drove me through all the streets and I reached the destination. And at that time, I recalled, not too long ago, only 25 years ago, late 90s, when I used to have, a bundle of maps in my car trunk, and I would drive through, California or other places in the US. Everything was on the map. Sometimes we will stop at the gas stations and look at the maps and find where the destination is or which main road we need to take. So mapping technology has evolved over the last 2-3 decades a lot. It has gone from completely manual maps to digital maps, and I think everyone is familiar with Google Maps. Now we need to reach a friend. We just ask them to drop a pin and send us a pin, and we can do the navigation using that pin by using either Apple Maps or Google Maps or some other kind of mapping technology. So the mapping technology has seen this evolution. So what is next? And to talk about that, we have an accomplished computer scientist with us who is working in this specific domain. He has idealized and started a startup in this domain. We're going to talk about Ali Hussein. Ali Hussein is our guest here. Thank you, Ali, for joining us, and thank you for Park Launch for arranging this webinar, and thank you for all the people who have worked behind the scenes. So just quick introduction of Ali. He is by profession a computer scientist, very accomplished computer scientist who has a vast experience in the high-tech industry, starting with Microsoft and going into technologies which are really cutting edge these days, such as blockchain, Web3, AI, machine learning, and game design. So we're going to talk about some of those milestones that Ali has covered during his journey. I think he started his career at Microsoft, one of the companies which people try to get into Microsoft to make sure that they have great software engineering skills. I have worked with a lot of people from Microsoft who have been alumni of Microsoft. I always have a very, very high regard for them. So after Microsoft, Ali transitioned to SparkCognition, which builds industrial solutions based on AI, where he played a pivotal role as the director of solutions. He strategized the product and conceptualized it and built the product. During this time, his contribution also involved technologies such as natural language processing, which is again a very high in demand technology these days. Okay. Ali's expertise also extends to very interesting area of drone airspace domain, and he worked at SkyGrid as the chief product officer, designed the product and built the product from scratch. This was a joint venture between SparkCognition and the Boeing company. As the founding member of SkyGrid, he led the company's product strategies, developed the AI and blockchain technologies to address complex challenges, and we're going to talk about some of those. Our main focus is going to be on the digital mapping technology, which is Ali's latest venture. He has several patents to his name, and we're going to briefly talk about some of those patents as well. And he's the founding advisor to Navigate, which is the company which has evolved the digital mapping technology, which has seen from manual to what we see currently and where we are going next. And we're going to talk to Ali about that. Thank you, Ali, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the very kind introduction.
Great. So, Ali, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about your professional journey. Although I have described your role at Microsoft SparkCognition, I think the audience would like to hear from you. Um, when you started off and worked at Microsoft, I think I will probably go a little bit before that. If you can tell the audience, where did you graduate from, and what your academic journey has been.
Absolutely. So, after doing my A levels in Lahore from Lahore Grammar School, I came out to UT Austin, where I did a dual degree in economics and computer science. और उसके बाद I started applying for jobs when I was graduating, got into Microsoft, and relocated to Seattle to start working at Microsoft. I was there for about 3.5 years, and that's when I moved back to Austin, joining SparkCognition when it was quite small. I think there were about 8 or 10 or 12 people, something like that. I think we were under 10 or so. And then have been with the company now for about 8.5 years. Um, so that's been, a large majority of my time. And at SparkCognition, as you mentioned, I was doing a lot of work on natural language processing, and then worked a bunch on, our emerging technology projects. So had a bunch of experience on VR and AR, doing projects with, the HoloLens, all of these various headsets for VR, like Vive and things like the Quest and so on. And some of it was also on blockchain. So that led to SkyGrid, because Boeing has been an investor in SparkCognition. So there was an existing relationship there. They were also a customer, and we were working on a lot of projects around drones. SparkCognition Labs was building drones, as well as looking at drone software, how to command and control drones and so on. So Boeing found that very interesting, and then we kind of discussed all of the different possibilities, and they wanted to do a joint venture 50-50 with SparkCognition, where we spin out all of the drone work, specifically the software platform that we were building, and kind of do that under the SkyGrid umbrella. So that was the last kind of 3.5 years or so of my career. And then, as you said, most recently focusing on Navigate, which is looking to revolutionize digital mapping and try to make it a lot more equitable and community centric than it has been in the past. So that's a quick overview there.
That's great. Ali, you also have interest in gaming technology, and I think you forgot about Forgotten Machine.
No, it's one of those things where
That's
ever
your
since I
passion
was,
project?
yeah, that is my passion project and has been for many, many years, and I think will continue to be my passion project for forever. It's one of those typical things where I got into computer science because I wanted to make my own games, and I've been making games for the last decade or so. Started with the iPhone very early on when the iPhone was released. Made a bunch of word games for that, and then made some games for Windows as well. And currently working on a couple of game projects as well. So that's just something that I do to kind of keep things fun.
So is that your way of unwinding and
Yes,
yourself?
very, very much so.
Okay, all right, great. People do that for a living, and yeah, that's
it's
that's
it's
great.
very stressful if you do it for a living. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's nice to do that to unwind.
excellent, excellent. So, Ali, you have been working in technologies which are latest and greatest, at the cutting edge, blockchain, Web3. We have seen a lot of traction in the blockchain and Web3 in the last 10, 15 years. Similarly, the last several years have seen an exponential growth of demand in AI and machine learning, NLP areas. So what motivates you to to keep abreast with the latest and greatest, the new technologies? What keeps you motivated?
I think there's always a lot of stuff going on, like you're saying. Most recently in the field of AI, LLMs are the new craze. Everyone's super excited about them. They've kind of revolutionized a lot of things and will continue to do so. For me personally, it's always about the kind of problems that technology can help you solve. So taking Web3 or blockchain as an example, it's not so much the kind of intricacies of how the blockchain works, etc. That's fascinating to me. What's fascinating to me is the fact that there's a lot of use cases that it enables, and that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. So if there's technology that you can use to enable exciting use cases, that's essentially what I'm on the lookout for.
That's great. I see that people have already started asking question about Navigate. This is somebody has asked about the regulation impact on Navigate. We will get to that, but not right now. So whoever has asked that question, we will request you to kindly wait until we get there. You are running ahead of us. So Ali, I would like to jump right into the digital mapping space. As it has evolved, I have seen this evolving, from those manual maps, and probably you are too young to remember those days,
Yeah, I do remember those days.
So literally, I used to have like dozens of these maps of various states. I used to like to drive, through California, Arizona, Utah. I lived on the West Coast for about 8 years in the US, and I had all of these maps, at large scale and small scale. Always received those from American Automobile Association. I think they have stopped giving those maps, although they are still giving those other services. So the mapping technology has gone digital with the advent of smartphones. We have seen high dependency of people for finding directions on Google Maps. So Lahore, for example, is a very old city. If you are going to the inner parts of Lahore, the streets are very confusing. But with the help of Google, I was there just last week on Circular Road near Urdu Bazaar, and it was just very easy for me to navigate and go reach the destination where I wanted to go. 15 years ago, it would have been a nightmare for me. And asking directions from Lahori people is also not a piece of cake, So, and I have experienced that as well. So I think it would be great if you can summarize your view of the digital mapping space as it exists today. We are familiar with Google and Apple. You can talk about those or some other competing technologies. What are some of the shortcomings of the current solutions in the digital mapping space? So we will go to the next stage of Navigate, what is needed and how we will get there. But what is the current state of affairs in the digital mapping space?
That's a great question. So I think, like you said, I mean, there are two dominant players really. There's Google and there's Apple. And then from kind of a mapping infrastructure standpoint, there's a company called Mapbox that's been, providing a lot of different APIs where you can use their maps and kind of build applications on that. So I think, for example, Pokemon Go uses Mapbox. A bunch of other applications use Mapbox as the underlying thing, and they've kind of been expanding their stuff. I think from what I've observed, the primary focus for Google Maps and Apple Maps has, been the Western world. And you were mentioning Lahore just now. During my most recent trip, I was using Google Maps in Lahore, and there were a bunch of addresses in defense that I was trying to find. And depending on which address it is and how you write it out, Google may or may not be able to find it. So like you said, being able to rely on people to drop pins makes navigation a lot easier if you have the geolocation of the space. But there's a lot of stuff that is neglected when it comes to countries like Pakistan or India, or even places within the United States or within Europe that are not major cities. You'll see a lot of inaccuracies or slow updates being made there, and obviously that's kind of magnified many-fold when you look at the rest of the world, because that hasn't historically been where they've focused. So I think you get very good coverage. They're amazing technologies. If you're in all of the big Western cities, can't live without Google or Apple Maps. Everyone uses them every day. I mean, that's how Uber and Lyft and all of these services work. But there's a lot of potential to expand this globally, and there's a lot to improve upon when you start looking at the global market.
Okay, so if we look at it, from an external perspective, from an user's perspective or enterprise user's perspective, so ride sharing companies, for example, Lyft and Uber or Careem, for that matter, the maps that they use, they get those mapping services from one of these bigger companies like Google or Apple. Is that right?
I believe they might have started out that way, but Uber, for example, does a lot of their own mapping stuff. There's, they've started, obviously when you start out, you have, they didn't have any of this infrastructure, but now because Uber has such a massive network, they're able to get a lot of information from the drivers and users and telemetry off of their phones to improve all of this, and they use that to kind of improve their stack. So I think the focus for a lot of these companies, Mapbox being yet another example, is that you start with a small slice, and then as you get more and more users, you're able to utilize all of the information you're getting to kind of build out your own infrastructure and improve accuracy for your own systems. So
Okay.
I think it's a combination of both things.
So some of these enterprises who are the users of the maps, they probably, when they are very small as a startup, they can't afford to build their own maps. They will be using services from one of these bigger players who are, we can call them maybe mapping providers through APIs or something like that. And they have to pay money for that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And after they become, reasonably big, such as Uber, then they can try to do, some things on their own, maybe adding to the existing maps that they get from, maybe, I'm not sure if they do it from scratch. They, throw away the whatever they have been using, Google or Apple as their mapping service provider, and they build everything from scratch, or do they make some modifications to the existing?
I think it all starts with the data that's more useful for them. So like you said, in all of these use cases, it doesn't make sense to kind of throw everything away. And a good example of this is, Apple. When the iPhone launched, you had Google Maps on it. Apple launched Apple Maps because just as a company, their whole thesis is vertical integration and trying to keep everything in-house. And Apple Maps had a very, very painful launch. But the reason that it's become so popular now is just because of the massive amount of users that Apple was able to get on the iPhone. And essentially that powered the improvement of Apple Maps by many, many fold. So I think it starts off like that. Where you have to use someone else's infrastructure, and then for a lot of companies, it's focusing on the specific slices that are of interest to them, where they can build their IP and accumulate data to improve their systems. And for some companies like Apple, where it's all about vertical integration, they would ditch things completely and try and build their own stuff.
Okay. So, which means that, from a small company startup perspective, if I want to integrate some of the maps, the only choice that I have is, go to these few large players and integrate their maps, pay them some money. Does this not create sort of a monopolistic kind of a market?
It does. I mean, it's basically an oligopoly. There are 2 or 3 big providers, and that's what everyone uses.
And why are we not able to see many big providers? Is there a barrier to entry, or is it too difficult to get there, where Google or Apple already are?
Absolutely. Look, it's all about economies of scale that they're able to benefit from now, and the initial investment that you have to put into stuff like this is obviously not insignificant. And so, if you're looking at it from a small startup perspective, it would cost a lot of money. And anyone going up against Google or Apple's reserves and saying I'm going to build a mapping application with our own infrastructure from scratch is going to have a very, very tough uphill battle.
Okay, so in this kind of a situation, as I understand, and please correct me or refine this thought. In order to compete with these larger big players, you have to get into the competition by enabling some new technologies or make use of some technologies such that the task of building maps is not too expensive. A startup, for example, who wants to become a bigger mapping service player would not have the resources on day one to deploy the maps or collect the mapping data from around the world or around the globe, and they can probably rely on some crowdsourcing, as I understand that Navigate does that.
Absolutely.
Is that the right way of competing in this monopolistic kind of a market?
So I think this is where the whole Web3 aspect comes into play, and this is our thesis for Navigate, which is the fact that when you can kind of draw some analogies from Uber and how they took on the existing taxi infrastructure, for example. Uber didn't have any drivers, and they basically created the app. They started focusing on a few cities at a time, and as their network grew, they were able to get a large number of drivers and a large number of users. So the concept with Navigate is similar in the sense that when you try and kind of deploy your own infrastructure, and if you want to collect mapping information globally all on your own, it's a very, very expensive exercise. But if you're able to build a community and leverage that community, and people are able to build these maps out in a distributed way. You have users in Malaysia, users in Lahore, users in Karachi, users in London, Belgium, all different countries, cities all over the world. The kind of burden in terms of the infrastructure that you have to have is greatly reduced. So that's kind of the power of crowdsourcing. And we've seen this in the past with a lot of applications where even companies in Web 2 have significantly used community contributions to build out their platform. Waze is a mapping app. That's a good example of that. There are a bunch of other apps. There's a very famous hiking app, for example, that completely relies on its community to put information up about trails and reviews. If you look at something like Yelp, it's all powered by community and so on and so forth. So that is a very, very powerful way to collect and curate data by leveraging your community.
Great. So we understand that crowdsourcing is something which reduces the cost of data collection.
Absolutely.
You are relying on these decentralized or distributed sources of data. Normal people just like us are taking pictures and uploading those. What kind of data do we see that people might be uploading to populate the database of Navigate?
Right. So you can do several things, and this is kind of the infrastructure that we've been focused on building over the last year and a half, where you can take drone imagery, you can take dash cam imagery, or you can just upload images from your cell phones. Anything that has metadata that includes geolocations, whether it's this top-down drone imagery that I'm talking about, or whether it's stuff like dash cam imagery, all of that can be uploaded to Navigate. And the way that it works is that it goes through several pipelines that we've built. It basically extracts frames from the videos. It then further extracts information from those frames. What all do I see in this image? Are there particular objects that are of interest? Is there any road signage that I want to focus on that I can use to kind of augment my base layer map and update it saying there are new stop signs in this location, or there's a traffic signal here that wasn't there a week ago, so on and so forth, that there's a new lane that's opened up. All of these different examples. So you get this data dump, you extract frames from it, then you extract further information from those frames, and then you use that to build a new layer on top of your base map that basically makes your map more intelligent, more up to date.
So is it from this description, is it accurate to say that the kind of data that end users are crowdsourcing into the Navigate system, this data is somehow similar to what we see in Google Street View? Is
Yes,
that similar to
the
that?
raw data is
Yeah.
absolutely similar to what you see in Google Street View.
Yeah.
The difference is how that data is processed and
Mhm.
what insights and information is extracted from that data to make your map more up to date and more useful when you use it for routing.
Okay, great. So this would bring a challenge. One challenge that comes to my mind, the naive challenge would be that Google Street View data is collected by data collection infrastructure, which is fully controlled by them.
Google,
And
yes.
they can adjust that. Fully flexible infrastructure, because this is completely controlled by them. In
Yep.
the case of crowdsourcing, you don't have any sort of a control on users where they are sending the data or crowdsourcing the data to you. So losing that control on data collection architecture, does that not make the problem of extracting information very challenging?
It does. It does. And look, there are kind of different philosophies here, right? One very famous example here is the difference between Apple and Microsoft, where Microsoft focused on building Windows and putting Windows on as many different sorts of devices as it could, and Apple focused on kind of unifying their whole thing and looking for this vertical integration, their own hardware, their own software. You buy a Mac, you get the whole thing from Apple. That's essentially what this amounts to as well. And the way that we've gone about tackling this issue is, number one, applying certain constraints. So we don't want to get into the business of selling hardware. Navigate is a software platform, and we want to ensure, like you said, that we're able to get over all of these hurdles where when you do look at crowdsourcing, you'll obviously have a lot of different people around the world using different hardware to send all of this information to you. So there are some guidelines that are established, and there are some checks and balances in place that define things like, well, this has to be the minimum resolution. This is the type of metadata that the images have to have. Otherwise, they'll kind of be auto-rejected. And we found that gives us a pretty good balance in terms of being able to get the information that we need to extract from the images and not make it burdensome for the community in order to have to jump through a bunch of hurdles. Well, if I want to contribute data to navigate, I have to go buy this special camera and then use this special setup and so on and so forth. So you have to kind of, it's a balancing act, and you need to kind of find the sweet spot.
Excellent. So before we go into more questions about what incentive does a crowdsourcing user would have, and
Yes.
how do they get the reward? What is the accuracy of the data? How do you determine the accuracy of the crowdsourced data, that it is not fake in this world of fake information propagating? What if some images uploaded? We will go into some of those questions, but we have a couple of questions from the audience, and I will just bundle up both of those questions. And both of those questions are about the regulation.
Right.
Privacy and regulation. When some big company have their own data collection infrastructure, a regulator can actually bind them to collect data in a certain way. I remember, I think back in 2010, I was spending a year in Germany, and there was a big fight going on between Google and German authorities, who are really big in privacy. And this was about the Google Street View. Some of the people from Max Planck Institute, where I was working at that time, they had to go and talk to the German government and do some sort of a liaison between Google and the German government. And this was a big issue about the privacy. So from a regulatory standpoint, what kind of measures are envisioned in Navigate, or already built in Navigate, to protect the privacy of the contributors, and not just the privacy of the contributors, but also the privacy of the individuals who might be in one of the images that some contributor
Absolutely.
has contributed?
No, great question, and a really fundamental question when you're looking at building a platform like this, right? Like you said, the European Union in general has very strict privacy laws, very different from what you have here in the US and different parts of the world. The UAE, for example, has their own set of privacy laws where you're not allowed to upload information without the permission of authorities, again, because of privacy concerns. So what we do there is, obviously, we looked at all the different regions and all of the different rules and regulations that we had to comply with there. And then from an infrastructure perspective and the pipelines that I was mentioning, what we built in there is, number one, all of this data that gets uploaded, you are first processing all of this, scrubbing out any PII, whether it's things like license plates, number plates, faces of people, and then you take what's left, and then you're, extracting the additional things that I mentioned just earlier on, and kind of creating new map layers on that. So number one, you don't necessarily even have to expose the raw imagery. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, like a lot of other companies have had to do, and some of these guidelines are already in place, so you don't need to go and reinvent the wheel there. Google Street View. So let's say that Google has come and mapped my neighborhood, and you can go on Google, you can put in my address, and you can go into Street View and you can see my house. And I don't want that to happen. What I can do is I can put a request up with Google and say, hey, I'd like you to blur this. And that's, something that happens in Europe very commonly, where they have to blur a lot of this stuff. But even here in the United States, where the government allows you to put this up, but as an individual who owns a specific property, you can always say, I want you to remove XYZ from your platform that impacts me. So it's a combination of both of those things, where the platform in of itself handles a lot of the PII concerns so that none of this information is exposed. And then if there are users who feel that they're specifically impacted, they can always get in touch, and obviously their information is removed.
Okay. Now let's come to this question. We have another question from the audience that I will take, after asking my from my
Sure.
list of questions.
Sure.
Okay, I get that priority. So so let's first get to, what do the crowdsourcing users get? Why would they be incentivized, or what do they get in return?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few things here, right? Number one, historically, like I said, a lot of communities have helped build out products and platforms because fundamentally what they're interested in getting is a better product that helps them go about their day and do things more efficiently. So whether it's things like Yelp or Google reviews or things like that.
Wikipedia, for example.
Wikipedia is a great example of that. Exactly. I think the cool thing about Web3 specifically is that there's this whole economic aspect to it, right? So with Navigate, what we have in place is Navigate tokens. There's a fixed supply of 1 billion Navigate tokens that were created. And the way that works is that anyone who contributes data to the platform receives Navigate tokens as rewards, and all of the kind of the formula and the mathematical detail of all of the different factors that are looked at, the area that you're covering, what kind of population density does it have, how much distance have you covered, so on and so forth. That's all on the Navigate website. But essentially, you upload data to the platform and you get these tokens. Currently, what you can do with these tokens, because we're at a stage where we want to build out the community globally and grow the community, is that you can redeem them for gift cards for a lot of very well-known stores, like whether it's Adidas or Amazon and so on and so forth. So you can actually get tangible value out of uploading this data. Later on, when the token is publicly traded, that allows you to hold on to the tokens and trade them for yourself as well. So those are kind of the two opportunities that one has when you start collecting these tokens and earning these tokens as a reward mechanism for the platform.
So is there a mathematical formula to determine the level of contribution and how many tokens in reward of that contribution should be
Yes,
given
so
to them?
it's a combination about of where you're uploading data from, whether if you're doing data from the suburbs versus data from downtown, you will get more rewards. And like I said, happy to share that link. I actually don't remember the formula offhand, but that's something that's all published on the Navigate website and in our wiki. And whenever any changes are made there, it's all pretty transparent, so you can kind of see how to min-max your rewards.
Okay, so whenever there is some sort of a reward for something, there is a tendency in the general public that they will cook up something and maybe upload some fake pictures just like that.
Yes.
And how do we avoid that? How do we ensure the accuracy of the data which is crowdsourced?
It's a combination of automatic checks in place that we have and some manual checks. Obviously, if you just upload a cat video, that will get picked up and auto rejected. There is a number of other things that that are in place. For example, you look at the image, you look at the geolocation, we cross-reference that with data that we already have to make sure that that geolocation kind of corresponds to the base truth that we have and is not off by too much. It kind of you have a range where you make those checks, and then you can't do things like uploading the same image again and again because each image has its unique hash. Those hashes are checked. So there's a bunch of things like that. I'm giving you just a couple of examples on how we ensure that the authenticity of the data that is uploaded is maintained, and you don't end up with low quality images and low effort imagery being uploaded to the platform, just to kind of extract these rewards. And this is a large part of the problem that we have been solving infrastructurally over the last year or so.
Is this like a big challenge to address?
It is, right? Because there's a lot of different potential attack vectors where people can start just dumping tons of data. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and you have to make sure that you're covering all of the different vectors. And it really, as with all security stuff, it's always about having a solution that's good enough and that keeps you one step ahead of whoever's trying to game the system.
So there is a few more questions from the audience. I will skip two and we'll come back to those later. But I'm going to ask this one question,
Sure.
which is relevant to the discussion that we are having right now. Are there any specific devices that we should use for this data?
Yes. So again, that's information that what I'll actually do is I'll just paste this link here in chat. It's docs.nvg8.io. And what you can go here and see are all of the details around what you need if you want to contribute drone imagery, what altitude you should be flying at, what the camera angle should be, what the resolution of the imagery should be. Same thing for dash cam footage, what different dash cams you can use. We're constantly trying to support more and more hardware. And then if you're using those dash cams, what are the different settings that you should look at, and you should ensure that you have just to make the upload process smooth and ensuring that the majority of your data gets easily accepted and you don't kind of run into any hurdles while you're uploading this data.
But people will not be required to, purchase any specific device hardware.
No, that's the goal. The goal is that if you have a dash cam already, and it can be manufactured by anyone, but it meets the requirements that we need, like 1440p resolution, or recording imagery at 30 FPS, so on and so forth. Any camera that you use is good enough. And again, we're constantly trying to add more and more support for different hardware vendors.
Okay, so another relevant question that somebody asked earlier is about the fidelity of such maps. How granular those maps are. If the fidelity is too low, maybe it won't be too low, but is it sufficient for autonomous vehicles to use these kind of maps?
Right. So this is an interesting question, because depending on what autonomous vehicles you're talking about, if you talk about something like Tesla, Tesla does all of this stuff on their own, right? Every single Tesla is equipped with a bunch of cameras. They're constantly collecting this telemetry, and they're building their own maps and updating their own maps constantly. So they don't use anyone else. But currently, the motivation and the goal for Navigate Maps is to provide better routing experiences and ensure that the maps that you see are as up to date as possible. So, the examples that I mentioned earlier, there's a traffic light here that wasn't here yesterday. Google doesn't have it. but Navigate Maps does, or there is road signage that wasn't in place a few days ago and now is there. That's kind of the first goal. And we're not currently looking at such high fidelity data that it's used for autonomous vehicles, because again, from a market demand perspective, a lot of the autonomous vehicle companies do all of this collection themselves, and they want to keep that all in-house.
Okay, that's great. So the primary goal is to make sure that reasonably accurate, reasonably high granularity information is available, which is as current as possible.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great. So we have few more questions from the audience, and
Sure.
one of the questions is that if the data is checked manually, doesn't it make it difficult for verifying the authenticity of the data? How can we ensure the authenticity if manual checking is done?
Right. So it's like I said earlier, it's a combination of automatic and manual, right? I guess I'm a little confused too as what authentic means here, but basically, um, manual checking is the most strenuous type of checking that you can have in place, right? Because that
Sure.
basically means that you upload a video, I go through and I look at the video and I ensure that it makes sense. So all of these different things, like different frames that I'm seeing, the GPS location on each of those frames, or a sampling of those frames cross-referenced with the baseline imagery that we have, so that I can make sure that it's not like you're giving me the geolocation for main market in Lahore, but you have a picture of the Eiffel Tower, things like that. So a lot of these things can be captured and kind of filtered automatically, and then there's always this manual spot checking that's applied to ensure that you have authenticity. And another part of this is, and again, this is where the crowdsourcing and community participation comes into play. As you mentioned Wikipedia, right? You always have this issue of certain trolls kind of trying to deface a Wikipedia page, or update it and put some misinformation there. But overall, it works very well because a large percentage of the community is not malicious, and it is in their best interest to make sure that the platform has authentic data, because all of us are using it, right? Everyone uses Wikipedia. Same concept applies to Navigate, where you can also earn rewards for flagging things, or signing up to be a community moderator and saying, I'll spot check these images, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities as we kind of build this out and grow the ecosystem for users to really start owning more and more of it. And that's kind of the, when you look at Web3, that's one of the critical components, right? Being able to distribute ownership of a platform to the people.
Yeah. I think that's perhaps is a common problem with all the platforms where crowdsourcing is done. To some extent, existing maps, Google Maps also allows some sort of crowdsourcing. People can add their businesses and things like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is a mistake. Since we are relying on crowdsourcing and decentralization, can we not make something like and this is something which just came to my mind, and I'm just throwing it on the in front of you. Can we not have some sort of a voting from the rest of the crowd, whether something which has already been contributed by one user is authentic or not?
Exactly. No, that's absolutely right. And as I mentioned, those are exactly the kinds of mechanisms that you can put in place, where you're relying on the fact that the large majority of the community is not going to be malicious. And so if you look at all of these different voting systems that you can put in place and people going and flagging stuff, you'll be able to filter out anything that kind of gets through the automatic and manual checking and gets taken down fairly quickly. And we know that works because it's used worldwide.
Great. Somebody has asked a question about the business model for Navigate. Would such crowdsourced data be later sold to big players to update their maps, and may include, something like a, heat map for crimes or something else? Yeah.
So the way to look at Navigate, and that's a wonderful example that they've used recrime data, because that's something that we also do. It's basically, if you kind of zoom out, it's a GIS platform where if you want to, kind of put it in one sentence, it's all about creating new map layers. Now, all of this data contribution that I'm talking about, it's used to create a new map layer that augments the base map that you already have. And crime data is another example of how you can augment it. So in terms of the business model, there are, two kind of plays there. There's one for the public being able to use an app like this, and then specifically for enterprises to reach out to Navigate, and if they require specific data sets or specific information for certain areas and so on and so forth, that's something that the Navigate community can get incentivized to collect. And so not only does the community earn rewards and benefit from it, but you have a lot of these different enterprise customers who can just come on the platform and say, hey, I need data for this area over the next week or the next 2 weeks or the next month. And they just kind of get those data sets collected and available to them. So there's a consumer play and an enterprise play.
Yeah, and the crowdsourcing seems like a very interesting, very effective way of collecting, this sort of a vertical data, such as, for crime. I remember there was a project done at LUMS, many years ago, about mapping of the crime data in Lahore. In order to do that project, the team had to collect the data from all the police stations and somehow convert that into digital format and do the analytics and then map it on the GIS. That was a very big kind of an effort. And if Crowd is able to help with that, I think that's a very interesting way of collecting that kind of
absolutely
data.
Spot on.
Yeah, somebody also has made a suggestion that I see vloggers and tourists sometimes getting lost on hitting closed roads while using Google Maps. It can be really good PR if they can be reached out to use this application. Why not?
No, absolutely. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but there was actually a person, I think here in the US, who died while using Google Maps because there was a bridge that had collapsed like many years ago, and Google Maps didn't reflect that. So it was a collapsed bridge that hadn't been there for years, and it hadn't been updated. And that's one of the things I was saying, that if you're in the big cities and in kind of major areas that are frequently refreshed, you're good. But even here in the United States, if you go out into the suburbs or if you go to the smaller cities, they don't get frequent updates either. So there's actually a real safety need for being able to get higher fidelity and more frequently updated maps, especially as all of us rely on them so much.
Yeah, I have personally experienced that, especially in Pakistan, where there is not a lot of regulation for building walls, especially in the cantonment areas. My sister used to live in Rawalpindi, Kent area, and whenever I used to go to her house in the initial days, the first couple of times I went there, I just put it on the Google map, and every time I hit a wall, and that wall was built on the road. There was road on the other side as well. Luckily, I did not get killed, but yeah, I think there was a lot of trouble, which was I had to go around for 3 or 4 kilometers to reach her house then. So there are a few more questions. One question was about the team of Navigate. You are a founding advisor, right?
Yes.
Who else is running the show?
Right. So on our board of directors, we have Amir Hussein, who's the chairman of the board, and then we have Rumi Morales, who was at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. She's very deeply involved in the blockchain Web3 space. She's another board member. One of the core team members is actually amongst the participants right now, Amanda Center, who leads all operations and marketing. And then there is a small core team based here in the US, and then kind of a larger engineering team that is based out of Lahore, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Another very interesting question is about the role of AI in this, and we didn't get a chance to talk about that in finer details, but we understand that by using AI you can extract some features which could be useful for the businesses. So somebody has asked this question, that AI integration could add a layer of personalization. So for example, if I prefer some routes, whether I have to avoid smaller streets, I am not comfortable driving in those smaller streets, so it should only route me through bigger streets. And Google gives you some choices like that, like you can avoid toll roads or you can avoid highways and things like that. But I think the granularity of that selection is very coarse. But with AI integration, you can go as fine granular as you can, right?
100%, and that's one of the things that one of the features that we're working on actively, where over a period of time, Navigate Maps becomes personalized to you. So your instance of Navigate Maps is completely different from mine. It learns about your preferences, it learns about your frequent routes, it learns where you like to go and have coffee, what time you want to go and have coffee, and you can get information like if you want to go and grab coffee from Starbucks, instead of leaving at 2, you should leave at 2:10 because there's going to be a smaller line on the drive-through. And again, this is all informed by crowdsourced data over a period of time, because you can also learn about traffic patterns and so on and so forth. But that's the idea, that over a period of time, the map app becomes very personalized and very specifically tuned to what you want to use it for.
Great. So we have several more questions, but I'm afraid that we we will probably need another session for that. I would like to wrap it up and ask a couple of questions which are more related to Navigate. One is the claim about innovation, like presence of these big mapping provider players, which creates some monopolistic kind of an environment. This hinders the innovation. How does Navigate enable innovation?
One of the things that, by the way, I saw in passing, I saw a question here in the chat that was talking about, I think, Navigate Maps APIs being available. And so the goal that we have is to build out this platform with the help of crowdsourcing, and then work with developers initially, work with them on a one-on-one basis, where you use all of this data that's collected by Navigate, that's contributed to the Navigate ecosystem, to build applications that are powered by these new data sets that don't really exist right now. I think that is going to be the primary way to innovate, because one of the things that really excites me about Navigate is that when you look at all of the, when you look at the potential of the amount of data that you can collect with a global community, and you can, and you start thinking about these data sets that are not only, haven't existed before today, but will also be very frequently refreshed. I think when you just put that kind of data out there, the um, amount of cool applications that people will build on top of that is going to be limitless.
Okay. I also had a question, and I think in audience somebody asked a question which sort of mixes up with this question. Is some other sourcing platforms. So, for example, Waze was probably one of the first ones that allowed the users to report traffic incidents, and somebody has pointed out that if there are weather updates or personalized safety alerts like road accident or something like that, you can report it. I think after Google acquired Waze, they integrated that functionality into that their application.
Yeah.
How do you see Navigate being different from this traditional way of doing crowdsourcing, where traffic incidents have been reported, or slippery road, weather updates, snow in that some area or something like that is reported? How do you see Navigate to be different from those?
I think one of the main ways is that getting a much larger amount of data, because you're able to, like I said, you're able to look at things like dash cam footage and drone footage as two examples. Whereas when you look at Waze, essentially the type of crowdsourcing that they do is very different and very limited. There are a few different tags that you can apply on the map and say things like, hey, there's a car on the side of the road that just pulled over, or there's a cop here, or there's an accident here, and you can just select from I think 8 or 10 different options. Whereas one of the kind of core innovations that Navigate has is that you don't have to worry about, you can absolutely put tags on the map yourself, because we know that that works. But you can also not have to worry about that. Just upload raw data and let the AI pipelines worry about extracting relevant information from there and augmenting the map with that. So it's a lot more hands-off in certain cases, and it's able to process and extract a lot more information than you would be able to do manually on the road. Because I do all of this stuff with Waze as I'm driving, so I obviously can't, I can either drive or I can input stuff for Waze and kind of make the map better. So we need a way to kind of do that more automatically, and that's what Navigate is looking at.
Another thing that comes to mind is which differentiates is rewarding the end users who are crowdsourcing the data.
Exactly.
I don't know if any other mapping platform has this kind of a provision where
No,
yeah.
they don't. I mean, Waze got acquired by Google for, I think, over $1 billion.
Yeah.
It was at the time, and I think it still is, probably the largest acquisition that happened in the Israeli tech industry. That's where it started. So, the users who basically built the whole thing didn't really
They,
see any of that
they
profit.
didn't get anything. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, they did not get a share of the $1 billion.
And just to get a sense of the use of blockchain Web3 in this sort of context is the creation of the token which would be handed out to the
Creation
consumers.
of the token is one thing, and the other thing is, we want to be able to kind of position this platform in a way that if you continue to upload data to it, you continue to get rewarded, ideally, over a period of time. And so the different use cases for the blockchain there are, number one, when you upload all of this data, because we're relying on a lot of imagery and video, obviously it doesn't make sense to put all of that on the blockchain because it's too much data, and that's really not something that a distributed ledger is optimized for. However, when you upload all of this data, what we do want to track is how much data did you upload, what images did you upload, what images did I upload, and so analyzing that footage, hashing that information and putting those hashes and writing those on chain so that the permanence of who uploaded what information is publicly available and is completely auditable, because you want a platform like this to be as transparent as possible.
Okay. Do you think that would turf into the privacy area somehow?
Not, I don't believe it would, because that's something that we had long discussions on, and obviously you have to look at the legal aspects of all of this as well. And this is why specifically the way that people are identified is not through any PII. It's either your user ID or your wallet address, which is pseudonymous, right? It's not, it doesn't have, it's just a big kind of hexadecimal address. And the other part of it is also the fact that the type of information that's stored, like I said, are all of the hashes. So you're not getting all of the raw imagery. You are getting the hashes of the images. And so you can always use that as a verification mechanism, but you don't actually need to expose all of that raw imagery to anyone and everyone all over the world. So that's still gated and protected, but you have the auditability of it completely transparent.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ali. We still have a few more questions, but I think we have addressed most of the questions that have been asked by the audience. I have listed down a few questions about the product. I think I have asked all of my questions. We did not go into too much detail about the usage of AI, what kind of specific benefit we can get by using AI, but I think everyone got an idea that we can use AI to serve a specific vertical, and for specific enterprises you can get different types of models that you can use. I think that has been a great introduction to the product. That has been great introduction about to your professional journey. Thank you very much for being with us, and I would like to thank everyone who has worked for making this this webinar live. And thank you, Ali Fahad, who is running Park Launch, and thank you Park Launch as the platform. Amanda has helped us greatly in putting this together. And finally, Ali, thank you so much. I know that you traveled just over the weekend, and you were still able to make time for us. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, and wonderful discussion.
Best wishes for the Navigate.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.